Matt is still with us, but he's still signed in online in Glinda, so this is be part of the recording too. Before we get too far into, like I said, there's just a couple of things that I want to wrap up. I'll go into the agenda. Review. We accomplished all of these this morning. We published our WFDSS decision. This is what the WFDSS decision looks like. I guess my challenge to you guys is it sounds like maybe there's some additional scenarios being planned. If you guys want to do another scenario, you would go into the same decision and create a better decision, right? So build upon this decision. This is just a basic decision. If I was to score it, I bet I wouldn't even give it 10 points. You know, if I wouldn't even end up on the scorecard. just joking. This is, I mean, the intent wasn't this morning, wasn't to walk you guys and talk you through how to write every section. The intent was to show you how to do the section, show you the theory of how to do the editing for every section, and then create a product and get it approved. And that's what we did. That's a basic decision. And there's no shame in getting C work out the door. You know what I mean? But this is C work, and we can make it better. So that's in your training platform. All of you are collaborators. It's available to any single one of you that wants to go in there and work on it. But I wanted to just ask. I asked Adam, is there anything that I glossed over this morning that maybe I can answer now for you if I left something unclear?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that was my intent anyway, and hopefully you guys feel good about the dual approval thing. I mean, I think it kind of showed if you're in the same room, it's easy enough, even if it's a Teams meeting, right? I mean, that other agency administrator could be on a Teams meeting and doing that same thing that we just did on their side with their people, and they would be able to approve the decision. So the format that we're doing it in, I mean, I've been kind of thinking that through. This would probably be really realistic to what we're going to be doing this summer, especially if we get busy, you know. So be thinking about how you can do that collaboratively and efficiently, and if it's using Teams or using in-person meetings, whatever that combination looks like. I think there's a fit for everything.
I guess some clarification on when there's different strategies proposed than full suppression, because it sounded like there was no scenario where we weren't just going to say full suppression. And so
that is our secretary's direction at this time.
Yeah. And so in the WFDSS decision portal, that's the only thing that we're going to put in the where other strategies considered. And we would put that we don't have any in this district. We put that we don't have any specific NEPA because we don't have a wilderness management plan, because we don't have anything in our resource management plan that is actually ironed out as a plan. Like that's how you were describing that.
Yeah. So if we had in the designatorials, we had NEPA, we potentially either actively broadcast burn or natural emissions, depending on what the fire is doing. If it is meeting the objective,
did I miss anything?
But if not, then we would.
I had another call and I was like,
Jason, hot mic.
Yeah. We compared it to say it's not meeting objective to allow for natural open suppression.
And it doesn't sound like we need to compare it anywhere in the district though, right? Because we won't have any. Okay, that was kind of my question.
And I think Dylan is going to bring up some non-overlapping shapes that essentially define the entire district, other than, of course, we kind of outlined these where it's full suppression, I say, or for other, which is typically community food.
How these being somewhere in Stillwater. Okay. We figure out where that is.
We'll bring it up.
Yeah. And why that spot in Stillwater?
It's like, I don't want to say it's legacy, but it was just written that way in RMP. So we're still nearing it. And the way it was written was fires historically occurred out there at certain sizes. So there's the capability, even though we don't have the NEPA in place, to allow lightning class fire to burn to a certain size, a couple hundred. The condition is mountain ranges don't support that stuff side of the fire. So there's no plan in place to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds just a little different than what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, but if that's what we're doing, then in that section of Stillwater, then okay.
Your FMP is reflecting your RMP goal and shows that that is an option.
Okay.
But when you go into WFDS, if you have a fire out there this summer, you're checking full suppression and just saying, we're going full suppression.
But then we compare.
You can, but under secretarial direction, if the secretary says, why do we need to rationalize that any further than secretarial direction?
Yeah.
That would be my only thing I'd throw out to the discussion, and that, you know what I mean? If the
Yeah.
secretary says you're going full suppression, that's all the rationalization justification we need to put, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we didn't, that's what that comparison option was for.
Yeah.
Say 2 years ago,
Yeah.
that same fire, we did have that direction. We would use that and we would say, even though our LRMP states this, we are deciding to go full suppression because of these concerns, and we can still rationalize it out. So
Got it.
like Elko, for example, they have areas that they could use fire use if they wanted to, but if it neighbors greater sage grouse, they put it out every time.
Got it.
So that's why we never exercise it anywhere else, because of the greater sage grouse.
Okay, this is all making sense.
Yeah. So we do have the authority in a lot of places. It's just we override that in our decision, and that's what our decisions come down to. That's why our decisions are decisions. We're saying, even though our LRMP says that, this 1,000-acre block somewhere up in the PJ could burn because it's, next to sage grouse habitat, we're going full suppression, putting fire out, all possible.
Makes sense.
Yep. It's a great question, though. And that's why we have these. That's why we have these. Top that stuff out and make sure we're on the
Yeah,
same page.
rather talk it out now.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on?
Is there anything else you guys can think of from this morning? Otherwise, we will go into Spatial Fire Planning Service. And there's two things I do want to cover this afternoon. One was going through the data that you guys have in Spatial Fire Planning Service, making sure that between Wildland Fire Service, Bureau, that everybody has a good understanding of what we have in Spatial Fire Planning Service, and having those discussions of what we base that on, and having those discussions of right now we're going through FMP rewrites, right? I think, yeah, we're going through FMP rewrites. You guys are part of that as well. We're supposed to, by December 31st of this year, we're supposed to have FMPs ready for Bureau approval, and that's going to incorporate the new greater sage grouse layers, which don't necessarily change our direction a lot. I mean, obviously you guys are going through your meeting tomorrow, you'll find out, but there's a significant habitat reduction. So what that did is that opened up a lot of areas that were once greater sage grouse habitat are now non-greater sage grouse habitat, or OHMA, and that opened them up to, less fire management restriction from what we're used to from our PHMA and our GHMA, right? And in your guys' case, by state as well.
But
So,
by state isn't changing, that's not part of that.
right, by state stays the same. By state still falls under the direction of the 2015 plan, right?
Yep.
So, and that's a great kind of segue. I'm showing. So we're going to go through Spatial Fire Planning Service. The first layers that we have loaded up are the Carson District layers. And again, what Spatial Fire Planning Service is this is just another AGOL interface where us as fire planners load all of the text basically that gets imported into WIP. So we load the spatial shapes and the text. We can do some basic editing with the text, and then with this read the Spatial Fire Planning Service and imports that information into your decision based off of the planning area, spatial inventory, intercept. So that's how that works. I work with the fire planners. This is a standing monthly topic as far as updates to Spatial Fire Planning Service. It's kind of a whole another environment that you have to learn. There's weekly calls. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So your fire planners are fairly engaged, but if they need assistance with doing any of the edits, I'm more than available to help with the edits. within Spatial Fire Planning Service, it's broken into, this is your NVCCD unit boundary right here, and you have to let it process sometimes, so be patient with the map. And as far as being able to view the text too, it's not very user friendly as far as being able to view the text. So we can talk through it and have those discussions, but in a lot of cases, the easiest way to actually view the text is to either do it in WFDS or do it in ArcPro. So it's not set up, I mean, it's set up to edit. Right now, we're in just the view data category. If you want to edit language, you can move over here into this edit language, but this does, like Will, I think you, Jonathan, and Will are all data managers in the Spatial Fire Planning Service. So there's multiple options. That means any of those three folks can edit the text that goes in with the data. Like Steve Levitt is a shape editor. I'm not even a shape editor in Spatial Fire Planning Service. Only GIS specialists are shape editors. So Steve Levitt has that. He's the one that controls access to all the GIS shapes. But the reason I bring this up is because when they made the transition from WFDS to next generation WFDS and Spatial Fire Planning Service, all the information we had loaded up in WFDS was automatically brought in the Spatial Fire Planning Service. So like within your unit boundary in WFDS, we had what were called unit-wide shapes, and that was fire management direction that applied to an entire unit. So it's important that you understand that even within your unit boundary, you're still going to have what we used to call unit-wide shape direction in there. So in this case, you have fires within the G-shed major communities, major transportation routes you can manage to minimize visual impacts. You have a lot of similar language, right? But there is some specific fire management language that comes out of your this reference. What's Carson RMP? Carson District RMP, right? Okay. The terminology from district to district kills me, so I always make sure that I'm trying to use the right.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Is the map that we're looking at right now, that's the CCD map.
Yep.
Has that been updated for the NDAA? It doesn't look like. So it doesn't have the NAS Fallon expansion cut out of it. And that's something we need to do. And when it originally came out, we were going to, but then the finalization of those ranges is always, there's no final. So it's, we leave it as is, and then know if the jurisdiction of NAS Valley, or put in a wrong unit boundary and decide who's it supposed to be. Because they wanted E17 until that range is active. And we will still be responding, and they have no fire management plan of their own to dictate what's done. So functionally, not too much has changed.
That's a good discussion, because that's, I think in a couple of those meetings we brought up, or I brought up anyway, spatial fire planning, and that if you can convince Naval Air Station to at least once they're final, we get that in spatial fire planning service, it would be huge and beneficial.
I know the one meeting that you brought it up explicitly, they're doing their fire management plan is not an equivalent of what our FMP does. And so I don't know if they will ever have an equivalent to what we do.
Right. No, and however you decide to do it, that NAS stuff could be loaded in as either another unit shape, or there's other options just to get it into the spatial firefighting service and have whatever fire management direction you want to associate with it. So there's options to at least get it added to where it does include any of it.
My other question with the lands, does that include lands that the Wildland Fire Service is responsible for putting fires out? The tribal allotment lands and the Fairfield Lake the BIA.
Right now, the CCD boundary would just crosswalk over to the BLM jurisdiction.
Okay, so those are on a different.
And each of those legacy agencies has their own spatial fire planning data layers.
So that, those should be under Western Nevada.
Okay, even though we have, but I think the BR, the reclamation lands.
Yes, and that's another good point, like the BOR stuff, that would be good data to load into spatial fire planning service at some point to whatever degree you guys need to load it into. So all that is within the capability and you can do it right now in spatial fire planning service. And like I said, it can even be loaded in as an other unit shape. And that just means this is no direction, this is the shape, this is the text associated. And it can say whatever you want.
Then essentially this polygon is not defining that it's Carson City District with this. If we draw a planning area, it will bring in this, you'll see the text and then have the ability to choose yes or no to include that in. And so that's why for any of Fallon, you understand about it.
So that is the unit boundary. These shapes, once they load, these would be considered your sub-unit. So sub-unit being underneath Carson District unit boundary, non-overlapping shapes. So each of these non-overlapping shapes, for example, this one is full suppression due to greater sage grouse. This one is full suppression, non-greater sage grouse, but still whatever LRMP direction we're deriving from, includes full suppression, keep fire put fire out small as possible size. And then you have, in Carson's case, you have full suppression bi-state sage grouse, which is specific to bi-state plan. And then you have the other than full suppression. And this is the polygon that we've been talking about. So when the Secretary of the Interior or the Chief of the Wildland Fire Service is looking in Spatial Fire Planning Service and he looks at Carson District, that's the polygon that shows up as anything other than full suppression is authorized. Which, if that's what you guys are good with, that's great. You know, that is what it is. But I would recommend, again, that polygon is tied back to the RMP goal and not specific NEPA, not a NEPA action that authorizes you to utilize naturally ignited fire. If you do have specific NEPA that authorizes managed of naturally ignited fire as a treatment action, then sure, that polygon should be there on that map and you guys should be able to display that and talk to that. But I don't know, this has been a carryover from previous fire planners as well. But my recommendation would be, as we're going through this evolution of the next FMP, you guys have an opportunity to maybe make it make more sense for you.
So, this is the mental battle I always had with this. How would we go about reclassifying that in a way where it would be contradictory to the land use plan, RMP, without doing an RMP amendment?
It wouldn't.
You can say it's the goal, but then,
Right.
but then why would we go against it and choose full spec? How would we?
Because you don't have the ability to implement that until you have a NEPA document authorizing it.
So would we?
The
lump it
goal of the RMP doesn't authorize.
So we would lump it into full suppression, non-greater safe grouse.
Aren't you guys gonna put pretty much every fire out in that polygon right now anyway?
Just trying to try to not ignore the RMP.
Right.
But then also
Yep, I understand.
say what the intent is.
Right.
At this point.
Right. And from my perspective, to make it operationally relevant, you want that data that shows where can we do something other than full suppression, right? Where do we have that authorized NEPA action that allows us to do that? Then everywhere else, if you know it's full suppression, you show it in spatial fire planning service as full suppression, knowing that you're going to put the fire out. And there's no question, there's no gray area when somebody looks at this and says, what does this mean? That's the only point I'm trying to make from the outside looking. So that can be something that you guys look at. And like I said, if there's valid, and if that's something you guys want to stick with, by all means. But right now, we decided the naming convention, right? That was an effort we went through a couple years ago where we're calling these other than full suppression. That was an effort that I did a couple years ago to try to standardize across the state as much as possible. So we can go from district to district and we're using the same terminology, as far as what our management response is. We can change whatever you guys want, whatever Carson district needs that to say. You guys have that flexibility right now. And within the Spatial Fire Planning Service, you can make those changes. There's nothing that says we have to do things one way or another. So I just wanted to bring it up because now is the time with the leadership that you guys have looking into the future when we're working on this new FMP. If you have an opportunity to make this maybe a little bit clearer, you have that opportunity now. And if that's the best way you want to convey that and demonstrate it, but like I said, just imagine if I'm in the secretary's office or I'm at the chief's office and I'm told, go through a Spatial Fire Planning Service, identify everywhere that's identified other than full suppression or not full suppression. This pop up. And you want to take that phone call on a Friday afternoon, Kim?
I mean, it's better than fixing a hole in the wall room. It really was a secretarial call. It's like, go fix the road.
That's the only point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, but I get where Adam's coming from too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, the difference is in the interpretation. Just because you have an RMP goal that states that's the goal, and if that's the interpretation of leadership or NEPA planners or whatever, then fine. I understand that. That's a decision, but
yeah, and it wouldn't be my decision, but I view it as two ways. The current one, you only define other than full suppression where you have either approved NEPA to manage it. The other is RMP is saying you can do it in the places that you have approved NEPA. And so both are kind of, there's a follow along to the initial.
I get it. Well, and the other side of that, right now we're going, you've heard me reference the National Fire Board memo that's changing suppression terminology. Other than full suppression is going to be stricken from our record. We're not even going to be allowed to think that here in the next 2 weeks, maybe longer. So that's what they want to take away every managed, monitored point zone protection option and make it so it's either direct containment or direct suppression or indirect containment would be the two options. And both options require some level of placing people into that area. So
will the FMP provide us with the NEPA coverage if we do make those changes?
no. It's whatever project, the FMP is just a container, right? So whatever, like a lot of times we'll have fuels projects where if they're doing, if they're doing prescribed fire chaining, they'll go ahead and just analyze that treatment as well, just to make that part of the option. In that case, you could do it. But yeah, and this is kind of the gray area that we're getting a little closer direction on is we need to have actual NEPA documents that authorize naturally ignited fire, managed naturally ignited fire as a treatment alternative in order to be covered, right? So that's still at the district manager level. I know that.
Well, I mean, you could call this layer like NEPA approved other than full suppression, right? And then nothing would pop up when you turn that layer on because we don't have any NEPA approved.
Sure.
Other than
there's a lot of ways you could
do it that way. That doesn't stop the secretary from seeing it as a layer.
Right.
But
maybe I shouldn't have said it like that.
No, I think I really did get a call about fixing hole in the wall road, so it's possible.
It happens. And I just think of, why do we put that data in spatial fire planning system? We want our decision makers to be able to look on a map, look at where the fire is and say, can we do this or can we not do this? And if it's not authorized, why do we even, that just confuses.
Maybe that's another word, authorized.
Approved, yeah. And
approved other than.
There may not even be an option for other than full suppression once this memo clarification comes out. So that's the whole.
No, if that does come down and our hand is forced to break that from any way, that's simple.
Yeah.
But I always coming from the BLM, so R&D is what we all work off of, and that's what I wanted to keep it.
Mhm.
And then when we have a fire out there, that strategic comparison is where we would say the R&D is saying other than full suppression, conditions on the ground are not beneficial for where it's burning. The results are not, so full suppression is what we're choosing instead of the R&D.
Yeah, see, and I'm following what you're saying, and I feel like then too, because now you're a different agency implementing your or conducting your work under our RP, like there's maybe even a higher bar of making sure, because you're liable, you
Yeah,
or Palma is liable now
for not following the rules.
for not following the RP. I'm no longer liable for what you guys do. So I could see it as just a higher bar of making sure that you're marrying that up, right? So that's where I see where you're coming from of saying like there needs to be that what you just said, that whole continuum of thought needs to be documented somehow, somewhere.
Or do an amendment.
Good thing. You like made Matt super happy.
I'm a planner for corporate trade, and people actually arrange their land use plan. I'm like, oh, 5 years.
I say, I want to talk about sage grouse has got to make you happy too, right?
So Matt probably can help dive into how to solve this. How do we solve this without amending the RP? I'm not going to do that.
Honestly,
You have to-
yeah, it's fine. Yeah. I'm not the secretary.
You want to be?
No.
Oh, just
You delegate authority to yourself.
just wait for the next boss.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Same as the last boss. Okay. So that's basically what you guys have in Spatial Fire Planning Service, right? I don't know how much other unit shapes are in the tab. I did want to go into the multi-unit shapes though, because within the multi-unit shapes, the multi-unit shapes are what we. So we load up the greater sage grouse data at the state level under the multi-unit shape in Spatial Fire Planning Service. What that allows us to do is associate all of the exact language that comes, and like I said, I can't really make that window any bigger, but all of that is the language directly out of the 2025 Greater Sage Grouse Amendment. And this applies to all of the districts across Nevada. And by loading it as a multi-unit shape, it allows us to put all of that direction in. And then when you clip it, it loads into your decision. But at the district level, if you don't want to put all of that verbose, management direction, fire 13 language, we've already got all that in as a multi-unit shape. You can just reference NV 13, NV 12, NV. That'd be the only reference you need to make because we have all of the language loaded up at the multi-unit shape. So we did that this spring. I went through FMO group, fuels group, did over a couple FMO calls, got approval from everybody. But each of the habitat categories is broken out. So within this shape right here, this includes all of the greater sage grouse and bi-state habitat across the state. And the reason why we include the bi-state, that was a discussion that Adam and I had, is we know that the direction comes from a different plan, but the actual on the ground management direction that firefighters have to follow is the same, right? You're asking them to do the exact same thing in bi-state as we're asking them to do in greater sage grouse habitat. So we put that reference in there as well. There is some language in there. There's some e-planning links going back to each of the parent documents. But then we've got it broken out by PHMA. So this is just the PHMA specific direction. Obviously it talks about, each of the amendments and so forth. And then GHMA, and then your bi-state layer is in there as well, just as a standalone bi-state layer. And then that references going back to the bi-state plans. So all of this information is loaded up at the multi-unit shape level, and it is in, as long as when you're in the strategic assessment tab of the decision, you have to tell it that you want the multi-unit shape direction, but it'll bring all of that in. It gets intersected by your planning area as well. And then actually in the decision itself, if we go back to the decision, this is what it looks like, and this may be, is this, yeah, that's still non-greater safe drives. That's what it looks like, right? See, those were all those bullet points that were under the first layer that we were looking at. So you can see it's a little easier to read it and with this, you know, but within the spatial fire planning service, that's where we do all the data edits and the text edits. So I can work with Will if there's additional edits that need done. There are some tricks. It's HTML tags, so there's a service that we use called HTML Cleaner. If he wants to make a nice clean bulleted list, it goes through and does all of the HTML tags and limits the, because you are limited to like 8,000 characters. So you got a lot, but you still got to be pretty tight lipped. You got to be succinct. So there, any questions on spatial fire planning, sir?
This is kind of. Go at the resource advisor, pressure brought up potential of if there are specific values or areas for each program that they would like baked in with specific language, this would be the avenue. But there, I think previously, they're inactive now. There were some polygons for a specific teeny species that are now spatially captured already in with this, so they got removed, but we have the ability to add information that may be lacking from a fire defense perspective, but as soon as they make a planning area, we can pull it in. Prompt them.
Yeah, because right now they make all these updates in like a read map, like as a kind of cohort together. And then now, especially that I understand this more, I'm like, wow, that's totally severed, right? It's like the ship's already running before the read's even there with their map running around, and if we get it incorporated in, I mean, we should probably do that.
The only, correct me, Dylan, this is public, so the only caveat is always going to be cultural.
Yeah,
One that was
sure.
Yeah, but that's a buffer. We've been doing buffered cultural data in Elko for years. All you gotta do is tell your cultural resource, what buffer can you put on it that allow us to make it public? And figure out what that buffer is, put a buffer on it, load it in spatial fire planning service.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue with cultural is that you have so many polygons. Polygons have a wide variety of textual meaning to them.
Sure.
Sort of like spatial accuracy. You know, some are just buffers themselves of a cultural clearance that was done for a landscape scale cultural survey in 1985. Like 80,000 acres, and the polygon is shown. Clearly, that's not the one that we're interested.
Maybe not down to the site level like that, but one thing that could be informative, but inherently I have some understanding that a Black Mountain, anywhere where there's retardant avoidance areas, the polygon, doesn't need to be the location of those, but a large downrange explain it. So when it gets pulled into the planning area,
And actual avoidance areas for retardant avoidance areas was one I brought up with Jason just a couple of weeks ago on that IDT meeting when we were chatting about the different layers. That's something that we're not good at on this district with our retardant avoidance layer. And so he was interested.
Brought up the other unit shapes. Are you guys talking? So you guys do have, these are just polygons. I don't know if you saw at the beginning, but you can, there's lines, there's polygons, and there's points. Most of your data in the other unit shape field is probably in polygons and points. But you know, I'm not sure, for example, this wildlife habitat. You don't get a lot of attribute data, on the other unit shapes, but usually like category wildlife habitat, high value wildlife habitat, current 2010. So that was put in 2010. There's other things in here I saw like fiat first priority, fiat second priority, fiat third priority. I love seeing that because you know what? That's still our priority. Even, yeah, according to the new plan, I mean, if we're falling back to the 2015 plan as still being valid, the 2015 plan states that the fiat priorities are a priority. So even though this was done in 2015, yeah, I mean, I know it's a circular argument. It could probably be argued the other way too, but that's, you know, at least when I first read it, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's all. But anyway, yeah, so these are the fiat priorities that came with the 2015 plan. So even though, I mean, technically a lot of, if it was non-greater sage-grouse habitat now, I would say that they wouldn't apply, but you can go back to those too, you know. Other districts, you know, have worked with NDOW. NDOW has provided data like, you know, we've asked them, what's your highest priority, what's your second highest priority, what's your third highest priority, and just give us shape files, and they've done that across the district. So, you know, we put it in as another unit shape. We say it's not a decisional document, you know, it's not a decisional, you know, use, but it's informing our decision. So.
But then are the values at risk.
Buffered shape file, including cultural resource, WSA, and ACEC data. It looks like, is that your BIA stuff? That's,
It looks like Colorado's incandescent rock, Houston, capital area. Blanking on that one.
Yeah, that one over by, Sage, Sage stuff. Okay. Okay.
They're from what we had, fire management. Specifically called out, not restricted.
so yeah, I would encourage you guys to look at it, you know, if you need to make edits, now is the time of year to make edits. It is, I know Adam, you've been on some of our calls. I make it a standing monthly item, you know, to highlight what edits need to be made in spatial fire planning service, but we've got a little bit more responsibility now with the transition and with the document we talked about earlier in the authorities. So I'm just trying to lay out a process where at least annually we're sitting down, having these discussions and deciding what edits need to be made and when we make, you know.
What examples have you seen work well in other districts? You know, as far as coordinating like a big read group of resource staff to contribute to this. And then usually it takes somebody with a little bit of a fire brain to know where it needs to go. Like what's working well in Elko, what's working well somewhere that's doing it well.
Yeah, I don't work for Elko anymore, so I'm not involved with their resource advisor program, but just that annual coordination with the resource advisor pool. And now that we have everything spatially, right? I mean, all my experience was 10 years ago when we were still making binders and putting them in kits, you know, that
Right.
people loaded into that.
We got a lot of those still, yeah.
But I would still, I mean, even if it was a virtual meeting, right? I mean, there's no reason why between fire planning people, fuels people, and resource advisor people, we can organize a 2-hour virtual meeting and highlight some of this. I mean, how many resource advisors know that we have all this data loaded up into our WFDSS system already, right? Like we were talking earlier. Probably good to share that information. So I would just, whatever coordination you can have with the resource advisors, but also bringing them into WFDSS, you know, I mean, actually logging them into WFDSS and having them work in WFDSS and, you know, that draft decision that we just created, make it to where they have to log in and download the PDF. So they know how to log in and download the PDF themselves. I mean, resource advisors and ICs have the same need to view the decision, and even more so now, give them the tools to actually log into WFDSS and view the decision instead of having to wait to see the PDF or hear somebody's interpretation. I don't know though. I mean, what does the future look like with resource advisors too, and
Yeah.
split between the service and the bureau, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I hope it works out. we've developed some great resource advisors over the years, you know, and seen them come and go and, but yeah, we definitely need to maintain that relationship for sure. So are there any other questions on Spatial Fire Planning Service? No, you guys good?
I don't, how do you get to this though? I think I used that.
And
There's a link on this link tree, but yeah, you would be able to view it. So I've got the link right here just because if you need to make any edits or anything while you're doing this. But outside of that, it's more the atoms of the world, the wheels of the world, you know, if you guys want access, we can get you access, but they're the ones that go in and do all the editing and really because it's just importing the data into WFDS. That's where that's where the agency administrators care about it more than WFDS. But yeah, the preseason planning, we just want to be able to show you guys what's in there and if there's any edits we need to make.
And does everybody have access? Cause I just clicked on it and those credentials to sign in. Isn't it just everybody?
No, you have to have an account. You have to have an approved AGOL account that has access
Oh, I
to
think
Spatial Fire
It's
Planning.
always hard to find it, but I think.
I view this similar to our templates. Doesn't exclude you from putting anything into this in the moment, but it pre-populates it for you, to get you ahead of the curve, and so it's already there. That's what. But the more we can have in, the simpler it is when we have to operate this agent.
So the last portion that'll wrap this up, if there's anything else you guys want to cover, is the integration. Sorry, I'm doing such fast scrolling. I wanted to get to this point right.
I mean, with this, I don't, we're making decisions based on that data. That we're not making decisions. And we might start polluting the decision document with.
Yeah, you don't want to put stuff in there that fire would react to.
And that's where I view a resource advisor map, that's on the ground guidance.
Right.
What goes into work, this is slightly different.
Yeah.
So if there's T&E species,
I just didn't want the two to start,
Yeah.
like, getting conflated with each other, you know?
yeah, we don't even know exactly where generally, and then that would then require a management objective or requirement for the team to manage for that thing.
Right, because I mean, there could be very good reasons why we're not gonna be managing for some of the resource concerns that the resource advisors bring to us. We're not putting these.
And so there's some vetting or criteria that should determine what goes into the spatial fire planning portal that then.
Yeah, right now it just seems a little, there could probably be more in there. Yeah. Yeah.
Everything that the resource advisors are looking at, I mean, every shape file, every layer, everything that they have in their kits should be in WFDS to one degree or the other. I mean, if that's a concern that they're planning around and you guys are asking them to manage anything differently than they would, you know, the normal
Yeah.
chunk of ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think to get over the lack of specificity on a lot of every unit for CCD essentially has the blanket statement. Which is about the following recommendations, so kind of cover whatever maybe that they should be working with.
Yeah, you could point back to that, yep.
So I'm scrolling through a couple different things here, and again, these are links that are available either on the link tree or on the agenda. And I'm just going to caveat this: you guys probably already have some kind of process in place to debrief your teams, and whatever that process is, I'm sure it works great. And if you use this, great, and if you got something better, great. But what I've developed here is a story map that can be used as a facilitation tool during a virtual brief. And the intent of doing it virtually is that, at least from my perspective as a past plans chief, I don't go out anymore. I haven't gone out in a couple of years, but I always appreciated the virtual in-brief of the plans chief because it allowed me and my team a lot more flexibility. I could tell them to make sure that they're on the side of the road with cell phone service at 12 o'clock on Friday. And they can be on the side of the road with cell phone service, sit through the in-brief, and then they can go on their way and travel the rest of the way and do what they need to do to get to the fire. And you can have your in-brief done as soon as you place the order for the team. That allows them to process information, continue to gather information, and then gives you an extra day or two to where they're actually coming down, getting set up, you're ahead of the curve. The other part of the in brief though is the WFDSS decision. So that between this story map right here, if you guys, or do you guys have a story map that you use, or do you guys have an electronic briefing option? How do you do it?
I'm not the best to explain it.
Okay. Is it accessible to the public?
I think so.
Right.
I think it's,
It would be accessible to a team member that's an AD from Eastern Montana.
I'll be lead up.
Yeah. And that's that's the point, right? Is we need to make something that's fully accessible. This story map here is accessible just on the internet, right? And whatever support materials you guys want to attach to it, and I'm scrolling through real quick, but basically this mirrors what the Red Book appendix for an in-briefing guide should cover, of course, with maps and everything else. As we get down here to the bottom though, if there is additional information that the local districts have, I can put this on here electronically, and I can even give you FireNet options to host electronic information that makes it fully public. We've set up a FireNet team that I've been using over the last couple of years through our fire planning stuff, but we can host materials that can be posted in a publicly shared drive that is fully public. There is no firewall, no DOI requirement, nothing. And that's really what you're trying to accomplish. The more you can set up on the FireNet side, Christina's done a really good job the last year or so trying to get the business stuff fully transitioned over to FireNet. But that's what you got to be thinking about is it may be available to somebody, but if you can't click on the web and access it, it's not available to those team members that are coming in. And that's what you're trying to make it available. So these are tools that you can use to help set yourself up for success. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is ISAP. I'm not going to go into, there's a whole bunch of information about ISAP. And I think the discussion we were having earlier about the resource advisors is kind of can caveat into this, because the one thing that I'm really trying to impress, once we get that initial decision done, the next thing that we really want to look at is where are our values at risk? And we want to look at, first of all, identifying what are those values at risk, right? Get them on a map, get your resource specialists. If they're not already on a map, get them together, get them on a room, get them on a map and with this. And then we start overlaying the fire behavior analysis with those resource values, and we can start developing timeframes, right? Fire behavior model says that we've got 48 hours until potential impact. We have 72 hours, 96 hours, whatever that time frame looks like. That allows you to start thinking prioritization. Then you can start grouping up your resource values, right? Because we know that if you give a team 20 priorities, how many are getting done? 5, right? So focus on 5. Focus on your top 5. What's your top 5? If you need to expand from there, expand from there. But identify those critical values at risk. And when we talk about ISAP is more than just risks. Okay? Think about a scenario where you've been briefed a team, they've come in, it's taken them 3 or 4 days to get the feet under them. The fire's been burning that entire time. They're being less than aggressive from your point of view. What options do you have to sit down and critically go through the WFDSS decision and say, these are the strategic actions that we would like you to employ? Let's come up with a plan to make sure that between team, agency, bureau, fire service, we're all on the same page and make sure that we understand, you understand what the good outcome is going to be, right? And that's what this is. That's what ISAP is. People try to label ISAP in a bunch of different ways. In most cases, if you're doing things right, ISAP may or may not be needed, right? If you're coordinating, collaborating, and you're working at all your jurisdictional partners, and they have a voice at the table, then you probably don't need it. But what ISAP allows you to do is between agency administrator, incident commander, and incident management team to refocus and develop a strategic course of action that has a positive outcome for everybody involved. So think about it that way, right? You guys have had enough fires that have been what you would consider a circus, right? That it takes a couple days, right? It takes a couple days to get a team set up for success. And if a good WFDS decision doesn't set that up for success, this is your fallback option. This is your next option. So there is a process. Adam, have you gone through as a city leader, right? So what's your process? What process have you seen? This is what I like to bring up. Because Tyler had some good observations from his perspective too, I guess.
And this is where I think I've talked to you before. I mean, we do ISAP on my team every single part, and it can be streamlined and quick depending on what is going on, or it is a grind daily. Comparing that to the instance we have here, it's hard to find that perfect translation of 30+ day campaign fire and 4 to 5 day. I think for us, the importance of passing along quickly is the critical values up front. The way we fight fires here, the strategy and strategic actions, I don't think will be pretty good. It isn't a lot of indirect, and we can't do confinement really, but it should be straightforward of how to protect the values with a full suppression strategy active that they have available. So that's the way I do it. Of how it would work well is if it's a out of GAC team coming, what are the values that we need them to know immediately, and then let them protect it through a full suppression strategy. It can get wildly complicated depending on scale of fire, types of values. We're talking about protecting watersheds and what that means. At risk to responders to protect something that's kind of nebulous. It can be challenging to get on the same page, especially with multiple jurisdictions.
Anybody else have experience with the actual ISAP process? No. It's something, I mean, the Forest Service has been really pushing it now for 2 years, hard. It started out as, I'm drawing a blank right now. NEMO. It started out as the NEMO effort. The NEMO organization identified the need, and they kind of came up with the process of ISAP, and then they pushed it into NVCCD, and now NVCCD is buying off on it, and that is where it is at now. We do have policy, but like Adam said, on our fires, they're so fast moving that a lot of times that strategic alignment is happening, and then if it's not happening, you're obviously behind the power curve. Where it is important, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, it seems like, where it is important, like that 2017 Long Valley fire, sort of like the transition periods. Be locally managed and local team. Some of these things are getting lost in the transition.
Well, I think now that we're talking about it more, I think we did have this come up, and it might have been on a fire last year or the year before. And I just remember there kind of being a discussion, and hopefully I'm talking about the right thing, but a concern about, well, if we identify it as a low value thing, and we have the ability to put it out right now, and it didn't account for exposure time, like how long firefighters were going to have to be on the incident. If something was identified as low value, go well. And so I don't know if that's something that's been fixed, but I know that was a big discussion point when we talked about it when the Forest Service brought it up on fire that we were working with them.
Right. That is part of it. And part of the need for the ISAP process is knowing that you could have multiple objectives on a fire, right? You could have multiple areas managed differently. So under this new direction that we're starting to see, if that does change, that really limits our decision space.
And why hard for me to always find how it's applicable the way that, what these a lot is, come in and agency administrator, Carrie said on it, the full suppression of the inverse, I don't want the risk to responders if you don't want to be, and that not jiving with operations in some way, whether it's not going direct actually imposes a higher level of risk in the future. And so it's painting the picture that you try to have operations be nicely aligned with what is the appropriate level of risk to the responders and the likely outcome of success and compare it. Sometimes it opens up thought processes that someone wasn't thinking about being very set on. You have to do it this way.
I remember it being like a really complicated thing too, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was-
and that's what people were a little frustrated with, is they couldn't maybe just, narrate a little bit about what a concern was.
Right.
Yeah.
So the process starts though with identifying values at risk. So that's one thing we can do within the WIP system. We didn't get into it in this decision, but within the platform as it is right now, you can draw a polygon on a map and you can identify that as a strategic action, and you can specify what you want that strategic action to look like, and that will be part of your WIP decision. So
That's like setting up the maps.
yeah, we don't have management action points anymore. There's no longer management action points yet. But think about management action points were line that you triggered. Now just think of the planning area as a piece of pizza, right? And every single piece of that pizza is going to be considered one type of management. So whether it's full suppression, point zone protection, monitor, you're going to have one type of management prescribed at every single area of that fire. If it's full suppression for the full fire, you just say full suppression over the entire planning area, then that answers that question, right? But if you do have multiple options, you just draw those polygons out, and every piece of the pie adds up to the full pizza, but you have coverage over that entire planning area, and it's specific to what major management options are. So same as management action point, it's just instead of crossing the line, it's a polygon.
Could see it essentially out east in one of the best deployed Plan Alpine percent full suppression. We want the team to go direct on every. There is a portion of the fire high up in the wilderness, very inaccessible, and they see the risk as too high. They may ask to do ISAP so they can demo some other strategic actions that are available, whether it's an indirect piece of line to mitigate some of those risks or something else.
Utilization of different tools, UAS platforms, always significantly reduce risk, and they're always part of the discussion.
Because it can go back and forth either from the agency, not liking what the team is doing, or the team trying to be like, the option that you're providing us is not ideal. And then you have the conversation to align on one common action.
So this is an example of an exercise I went through on a fire outside of Flagstaff. And I thought this was a good example, right? Because what I was asked to do as a strategic operational planner here was to identify values at risk, group up similar values at risk, and then work with the agency administrator to prioritize those values at risk. And this is basically what we came up with. And you can see it at the table. We're grouping everything together. So these are similar priorities. So red, orange, yellow, as far as priorities. And then over at the severity, we actually had fire modeling done through fire modeling. Like I said, that's just basic fire behavior output that tells you what the flame links are. That tells you whether or not where on the continuum of catastrophic, critical, or moderate the severity would be. And then probability comes from that FS Pro modeling. FS Pro actually gives you a percentile band. You can convert that by looking at, see, these tables right here are always useful tools whenever you're doing, and this is all part of the WFDSS guide. So again, if you keep that link tree as part of your links, you always have access to this. These tables these are the common definitions. So, everybody likes to say that, oh, that's a critical value at risk. Well, here we're saying this is actually the definition of critical. The asset's going to be destroyed, it's unusable or restricted for weeks. So, you know, you can't just say a fire impacting a pipeline is a critical resource. We know that pipeline's not going to get burned, right? What is the critical value that's going to be threatened by fire? So there's some common definitions that you can use there. Probability, the same thing. Where it falls on the matrix, you know, this tells you. So this is where, you know, you get everybody in the room, right? You identify your values, you start looking at fire behavior modeling, and then you start identifying, well, if we do this, here's our options if we do that. And there's some other tables in here as well. But I just wanted to highlight that ISAP process is driven by WFDS. So if you've done a good WFDS decision and you've identified those values at risk in your WFDS decision, that sets the team up for success and being able to start the ISAP process. Where if you just do a WFDS decision where you don't highlight values at risk or you don't prioritize what those values at risk are, there's going to be a lag time in figuring out what that is. So if you have time up until that end brief, up until that transition to sit down and do that, or have your resource advisors do that, or at least have a group start to identify that, that's a huge benefit in order to start this process too. It's just identifying those resources at risk, putting them on the map, and overlaying fire behavior runs to see what does that impact look like. Adam, you got any other? Adam's a sit unit leader, so I fall back on his expertise. He supervises FPAMs and LPAMs just like I did.
I like ISAP for certain incidents.
There's times it's needed, there's times it's not.
Yeah.
I'd be worried about ISAP this year for somebody getting their hands tied and feeling like they can't just put out a fire when you got a secretarial order that's kind of asking you to. If somebody brings it up and kind of maps out a course for you because you haven't been able to identify resources, and then let's say it ends up going longer than you expected and you had the opportunity to put it out, and here you are binded by this really quantitative tool.
So
Right.
So they're not gonna wait for this to be finished before they take action. ISAP is a continual process, so you showed one where it's like that the agency will provide information, the team provides information, and on day 3, have a meeting after the team has put together some of this quantitative.
I think I get that.
And then,
Yeah.
and then you continually add new values as the file develops, or if some values are no longer threatening, drop off and you add to it. But it kind of ebbs and flows as the incident progresses. So for a lot of our fires, it's like not a lot of ebb and flow, it's a lot of expansion and then super fast contraction because the fire is no longer. So I see it as by the time the ISAP process and the meetings start to flow, forward progression likely stops. And so values of that thing will start to drop off and probability.
Exactly. That would be a concern. Like, you know, you're letting it go longer as values drop off and they're not going there. What am I missing?
They would still, this
They would just
ISAP is more, if you have limited resources and you aren't able to do certain sides of the fire, where would you want to focus based off of the critical value?
So maybe I'm thinking of it wrong because it's just allocating resources and it's not changing the strategy of, you know, put it out right now. Am I wrong or right?
No, but it's helping the team. You go through ISAP as a team, like for example, there's still a process where you may only have the capacity to do 2 or 3 protections, right? So if the unit's saying these are our 5 priorities, but the team knows that they can only protect 3, as an IC, the IC and the agency administrator need to put their heads together and say, this is the reality of the situation. What are the 3 priorities? You know, and that's where this ISAP process can be part of that discussion. You bring in your ops chief, you bring in your logistics chief, and everybody starts discussing, if we do this, what are the trade-offs? If we do this, what are the benefits? And you just have those discussions until you figure out what is the best strategic option for the resources that you have that minimizes responder risk and provides a positive outcome.
I'm probably getting confused with how it gets applied. It seems like it's more about, you know, allocating resources. And
Think about the team too. I mean, really, ISAP is most successful in an extended attack with complex incident management team.
Yeah, whereas like my apprehension I brought up earlier is like, you know, it kind of forces the hand to make you decide one way, but if that's not how it ever gets used, then, you know, it might not.
Hey, my opinion, the secretary's memo is forcing our hand stronger than anything we ever want.
Yeah, so then, do you want to put something in the way of that?
I mean, Nevada BLM fought hard to get indirect, you know, our indirect strategies and tactics are actually referenced in our sage grouse plan. In 2015, you know, our fire planner at the time worked hard to get that language in there, because if you read like Utah's plan is the exact opposite. In Utah's sage grouse plan, it specifically says you cannot burn indirect in greater sage grouse habitat. You told them. In these years, in these anomaly years, you have to burn 10,000 acres to save 100,000. That's the only thing you can do. And by limiting our ability to go indirect, by saying we have to go direct, that takes away a huge tactic that we utilize frequently. If we're going back to the exact definition of indirect and direct strategies, tactics. Sure. And there is an exact definition that I don't think the public affairs staff at the secretary's office understands. To be frank. So anyway, I'll end it at that. I'll make sure I cut that out of the recording too. So if you see a weird ending on the video, we might just drop and fade to black. I'm sorry though. I don't mean, just from my perspective, there's things you don't say, and that secretary's memo is going to put people in a bad position later in the summer if we have a true fire season.
Which I think we will.
Yep. Every rancher in Nevada is going to reference back to that and say, "Oh, you guys did the burnout. Secretary said you had to go direct." So, are there other questions? Anything you guys want to cover before we break? Is that
Hey, welcome back with the question. Yeah, no problem. Got it now. Did I miss anything?
You can watch the YouTube recording.
He was running through models of with this, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have to get back to Elko. So if you guys are good, I appreciate the attendance, appreciate the participation. Thank you. Yeah, you guys being here all day really shows the dedication. So thank you. I appreciate the time. There is one more link. I'm not asking you to do it today. But at some point, if you guys can get back into that link tree, and if you go down to the training, there's a survey, training survey. If you can complete that, just give me some feedback. That helps me plan for next year too. I ask you to, you know, identify some topics you'd like me to cover. So if there's anything specific you'd like me to cover for next year. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Appreciate you coming out here.
Yep. I'm on my loop.